Hello everybody and welcome to yet another Best of Pedalshift. This is the Best of Pedalshift number 63, the Thanksgiving ride on the C&O. And for everybody in the United States who are listening to this on the day that I release it, happy Thanksgiving or happy late Thanksgiving if you're getting to it a few days later. This is a fun episode and it's a popular one, and it was basically me just talking while riding my bike down the Chesapeake and Ohio National Historic Park towpath. So I hope you all enjoy it. A reminder that December 1st, if you are in Portland, Oregon, I would love to meet up with you along with some other Pedalshift folks and some Sprocket folks at the Beermongers at Southeast Division and 12th to help celebrate the 100th episode of the Pedalshift Project, which we'll be recording that weekend. So would love to see you all there. It's also kind of a way to sneak in a little bit of a holiday party for bike touring interested folks. So come on down. We'll enjoy a few adult beverages and chat and hang out. I don't know how many people are going to come, but it'll be fun nonetheless. If it's a few, if it's a lot, we'll make it all happen. So December 1st, 7 p.m. Pacific time, of course, in the land of sunshine and bunnies, Portland, Oregon. Without further ado, let's go for a ride on the C&O. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. Greetings and welcome to another edition of the Pedalshift Project. The Pedalshift Project is a series of conversations, thoughts, and experiments around the bike touring lifestyle. From tips and tricks to ideas on how to tour more. Let's shrink the world by bike. The intro's a little different today. You don't have the rest of the stuff. You don't get to hear about, going to Twitter and Instagram and the Facebook and all that other kind of stuff. In fact, it's a little bit noisier than normal. What the hell's going on? First of all, for all those of you in the United States of America, happy Thanksgiving to you. It's been a interesting few weeks, I know, so we'll just leave it at that. And here we are on the C&O, on this episode of the Pedalshift Project. It is an all bicycle touring, literally while I record show. And in sort of celebration and in acknowledgement of today being a national holiday in the United States. For the rest of you in the world, Thanksgiving, of course, is time when we typically sort of get together with our families. It's a day of remembrance of Thanksgiving, literally and figuratively, and it's a kind of a special holiday for us. So happy to have you along for the ride as well. I am currently, this is as I recorded on the Saturday prior to Thanksgiving, and I just spent a night camping on the C&O near Harper's Ferry. And on this episode of the Pedalshift Project, I'm just going to sort of be talking about all sorts of different things related to that, plus some other things as well in gear talk and whatnot. But I'm going to be doing it from the saddle of a bicycle, just for something different, because sitting in front of a regular old microphone inside doesn't seem appropriate for the Thanksgiving episode. I thought perhaps, why don't we do it while I'm on the bike? So this could be terrible. This could be amazing. It's probably going to be shades of gray and somewhere in between, just like the rest of life. So here we go on the show. First up on the show is train noise, a new section of the show where you get to hear the beautiful sounds of TSX here in Brunswick, Maryland. Actually, we'll start off the show with the real section, which of course is the journal, and for this episode of the journal, I'll be talking a little bit about sort of the ride that I've had today and yesterday, and my thoughts on bike overnights, especially in the fall. It's sort of more of an extension of the last episode, where it was, of course, a little more focused on cold weather camping and of course, having Belle Star with me. Did not take her with me on this ride for a couple of reasons, which I'll get to in a second. And I'll just tell you a little bit about how this all sort of worked out. I have a tradition with my girlfriend who is into animal welfare and things along those lines, that every year we go to the Thanksgiving potluck celebration at Poplar Springs Animal Sanctuary, which is outside of DC, about 30 miles or so, but conveniently in very close proximity to Edwards Ferry Road and the C&O National Historic Park towpath, which I ride on right now. So what I've done in the past is I would ride out and meet her there, and she would drive, and we would put the bike in the back and then come back drive back, because usually I don't have enough hours of sunlight at this time of year to be able to do a full round trip and be able to participate in it over there. So this year I decided, rather than get up in the morning and start from DC, I thought it would be kind of nice and fun to ride out from Harper's Ferry, because the distances are about the same. Let's say a 3-hour ride, give or take, with a slightly different road approach, which we'll see how that all goes in a couple of hours. But I took the train out, took the Amtrak Capital Limited out, kind of. I get frequent train mile points, I guess, for riding on it, but I have to wonder if I'm in some top percentile of people who actually ride that route, because I feel like I ride it once a month in some ways. But anyways, it was again a very easy setup. It was got the bike, rolled right up, and went to this beautiful place, which is Harpers Ferry, West Virginia. And the ride was uneventful. Getting on the train was a little bit different than the last time. For those of you who have been with the show since the summer, at least, you probably have heard about my C&O adventure and how that sort of started. And I learned at that point that they want you up towards the front of the line and then put you in before everyone else. It didn't quite happen this time. They said, stay where you are, which was sort of not at the front of the line, but sort of certainly not at the back of the line. And then nobody said anything, so I just sort of rolled up as the line started moving independently of the line. Didn't feel great about that, but nobody gave me a lot of direction. But eventually they did just sort of have me go forward. I think it makes a lot of sense for folks with roll-on bikes to do that, because it does take us a few extra minutes to get things secure, because they don't help you with that. And if you've got very wide tires, this I definitely want to make sure I mention if I haven't before, for the new baggage cars on Amtrak, where you are the one that is putting the bike in, which seems to be what they're going to be doing on all long-haul routes. I strongly recommend that you get there early. If you have tires that are wider, then I'd say 40s, give or take. I have rather thick tires. It's going to take a lot of extra finagling. It's this big Jenga puzzle. You got to get it in at the right angle. I can't quite describe how it works, but you do have to sort of get it in with the spokes, and it's complicated for a wider tire. So if you're on a mountain bike or anything that has something that's a slightly wider tire, it's going to be tricky. If you've got a fat bike, this I just realized yesterday as I was kind of struggling a little bit with mine. I must have put this bike on one of those cars at least 4 or 5 times, if not more. Fat bike tire is not going to fit on that, so I don't know how that's going to work for those of you with fat bikes who are considering taking the train. I think that what you could conceivably do is bring a bungee or bring a Velcro strap or something to lash that front tire to the upper wheel lock. That's probably the best you're going to be able to do. And I don't know. It'll be interesting. I don't know if this has ever occurred to Amtrak, but probably not. The racks are built for, I'll say, skinny tire bikes, but certainly not for very wide tire bikes. Mine, like I said, pretty much barely gets in there, but it does work. So once you get in and get rolling, or get off the baggage car and go to your seat, it's all good. And the other thing that I've done more recently is I've left my bags with my bike, just because I feel like it's slightly more secure there than it would be just in the baggage rack, for lack of a better word, on some of these trains. Anyways, totally uneventful ride, beautiful ride, I should say, but I mean, it was quite warm going to Harper's Ferry here, and really all week it's been unseasonably warm. But of course, last night was the beginning of sort of a real cool down. I guess today is still going to be a little bit on the warm side, which I'm starting to feel it warm up a little bit now. It's a little bit after 9 a.m. as I'm riding right now. But I woke up and it was 35 degrees. And the forecast low was supposed to be 41. So I was prepared, and it worked out fine. But I have to say, it's getting to the point where I think I might be closing down the season once it gets much cooler than that for evening lows. But I'll talk a little bit more about that after having a second night in my new kind of cold weather gear. That I might try to push it a little bit further. One of the things that was interesting about this ride was, of course, last ride was during daylight savings time, so I had an extra hour at the end of the day of sunlight. Now that we're back on standard time here in the States, the time has shifted. If you're elsewhere in the world and you're like, what in the hell is that? You change your times during the seasons? Yes, we do that. It still makes no sense. So when the train came in a little bit after 5 o'clock, the sun had already set. The twilight was still sort of there, but it wasn't exactly light enough to be able to see. So it was light enough for me to be able to get all my stuff together, get everything lashed up. I could still see well enough for that at the train station. And then I put on my lights, and that was really helpful. I rarely have to put on lights for much of my riding. My commuting tends to be in enough light, at least for most of the year. When I do bike into where I go to work, I'm very, very close. And typically I'm coming back at an hour that it's much easier. And that's only when I bike. A lot of times I have the dogs with me and don't have the bike. So I don't actually bike in the dark very often. I do have a very powerful sort of external battery pack halogen kind of light, which I rarely get to pull out, but I did bring it for this trip, and it was really nice. I forgot how much I liked riding in the dark with this light. So I put on the light and got rolling. Got some people. We're going to take a quick pause. This is one of the fun parts about this episode. I'm going to try to make it as live as possible with this few edits. Hi there. How are you? See, now you can tell that I'm doing this while I'm actually riding. Well, other than the sound of the actual riding itself, right? I've got one more runner here, and then we'll get back to our show. It's sort of like one of those commercial breaks in some of those podcasts you like, except without the commercials. Well, he wasn't very friendly, and he had earbuds in, hopefully listening to a fine podcast brought by independent podcasters like me. Back to, the lights, riding in the lights on the C&O. Normally, I do not like riding in the dark on the C&O because it is fraught with tree roots and other things that you do not see on nice flat asphalt or even relatively flat chip seal. And in that part of the trail, in particular the mile and a half or so roughly between Harper's Ferry and Huckleberry Hill campsite where I stayed, as many of you have heard in the past episodes of the show, it's one of my favorites, if not the favorite on the entire trail. There are a ton of bad roots and rocks just jutting out. But with my big burly halogen flashlight, think like throwing the brights on of your car. Has on the high setting, it really shines the trail nicely, and there's a big wide cast as well. I didn't have it on that while I was on the bridge or in other parts where there were other people who were walking towards me, because there were still a couple of people on the trail at that hour, getting their walk in with their dog or whatnot. I don't like shining very bright lights on people when I can help it. So later, once I knew I was past that point and getting in more to the backcountry, if you will, portion of the couple of miles to the campsite, then I threw the brights on, and it was really nice. And it almost even got me thinking, wait, maybe I want to turn around and go towards Brunswick and stay at Bald Eagle or one of the campsites closer to, make my ride shorter in the morning. And I thought, it's probably a good idea to get the tent set up and get ready, because I knew it was going to start to get colder. It was probably still even in the 60s at that point. In fact, I do remember I looked at the dark sky, and it said it was 62, I think, as I was pitching my tent. So really very pleasant and very nice. And then in the next couple of hours, man, the bottom just dropped out of the temperature. And by the time I sort of drifted off to sleep somewhere between 8:45 and 9 or so, which is stupid early for me. But when I bicycle camp, it's always early. It was starting to get chilly. I had the same basic setup as I did in the ride prior when I had Belle with me, except I didn't have a nice warm dog next to me, so I knew it was going to be a little bit chillier. But my expectations were about the same temperature. And so I brought the hike and bike down sleeping bag, which again worked really, really well. And then I brought my secondary sort of liner, it's a fleece liner that usually I'll bring that and pair that with my summer bag when I'm in cold summer climates. Think Pacific Coast, think Oregon coast, think California coast, because that'll bring my summer bag rating down into probably somewhere in the upper 40s or so, which is overkill for the coast during the summer, but good because it's not unheard of for the temperatures to go into the low 50s. So it's kind of nice to have that extra little bit of layering. I bring it along not because I don't think that the hike and bike bag can't handle the temperatures that I was having, but just to have that extra little bit of warmth if I need it. And I'm glad I brought it last night. As I mentioned, it was forecast to go down into the low 40s, but actually went down into the mid 30s. And that's starting to get to the outer limits of the rating for the hike and bike bag, which is rated to 32 Fahrenheit. So as a result, I think if I am going to continue going deeper into the winter, or deeper in the fall at least, and perhaps into the winter this year with this setup, I'm definitely going to want to bring that fleece liner and perhaps something a little bit more. I also wore my jeans. I wore my hooded sweatshirt, and a hat, and I was perfectly warm all night. There were portions of the night I woke up around say 2:30, maybe 3 o'clock, which is after getting about 6 hours of sleep. My body's sort of like, okay, that's good, you're good, let's go. And of course I'm like, I'm not getting up at 3 in the morning. So that's when I started to notice that the temperature really started to drop into sort of the cold zone. But I was still very warm throughout the night as I sort of was in and out of sleep for the next several hours. Ended up waking up with the sun about, say, 6:30 or so, and realized, it was time to get up. Time to go get some breakfast in Brunswick, and got the camp all set up and got out of there relatively quickly. In camp, there were several people that I think might have been, they were hikers. I did not see other bicycles, which was interesting. It was a beautiful day, beautiful week to be hiking. So that area of the C&O has a partial crossover with the Appalachian Trail. For those of you who have ever hiked it, you'll remember it. And, of course, Harper's Ferry is a big stopping off point. It's where the is it the AT Alliance? I can't remember the exact name of the organization, but it is located in Harper's Ferry. So it's a place where a lot of the hikers end up stopping, and it's a free campground, so you do get a lot of hikers at that particular spot. Anyways, they were all very nice. Didn't have much chance to interact with them, because by the time I got there, of course, it was well after sunset, and everybody was sort of wrapping up, and I just wanted to eat dinner and kind of get into the tent and get ready for the night. So in the morning, I was able to say hello and goodbye to them, and it's interesting because this time of year when I have done some camping, and this is about as late as I usually go, I end up having the trail largely all to myself, and the campground certainly all to myself. Certainly last time I was out a couple weekends ago, that was the case. And I kind of like it that way this time of year. There's something really nice and tranquil to be able to have that. It is nice, however, to have you all along for the ride. This is unusual for me to be talking for this length of time while riding. Just past mile marker 52 for those of you playing the home game. On my way to about mile marker 30 today, so I've got about 2 hours of riding at the speed I'm going. I'm not pushing it too hard. Usually like to average about 10 miles per hour on the C&O Trail. You can go faster. I think the Park Service asks you to keep it below 15 miles per hour, which is perfectly fine. And I know a lot of people do, but I tend to like 10. It's a good, easy rhythm to have, especially when you're loaded. It's about what I do on paved roads as well. I think it's just the speed that I think I'm most comfortable at. There are times when I'm on the road that I do like to go a little bit faster if the conditions permit. Again, I'm trying to think of a few of the examples. Out in California, south of Eureka, going to the area right before the redwoods really start, the Avenue of the Giants at least really start. That's an area that I like to put the hammer down. It's sort of tilted just ever so slightly in your favor as you're going southbound, and you can really make up some miles and make up some time. It's I think the book tells you to go to this KOA campground in Eureka, and it's about 20 more miles to Fortuna. Stop me if you've heard this a few times. Many of you have. And I end up going to a place near a brewery, Eel River Brewing, and there's another private campground that is a little bit more expensive, but has a lot more good features, and then you're very close to the redwoods for a nice short next day, so it's a good time to do it. So anyways, that's pretty much it for this ride. Of course, I'll be reopening the journal as we get rolling here. Going through, I believe, Monocacy Aqueduct, and I'll put up some pictures in the show notes from past rides, because Lord knows I've taken pictures of every single corner of this beautiful edifice. It was destroyed by a flood years ago, and they rebuilt it, I want to say maybe 5 or 6 years ago. You can tell I'm being very accurate with my historical renderings here. So that was Monocacy Aqueduct. I hope you enjoyed that portion of the show. Next up on the show is Gear Talk. And Gear Talk is a section of the show where we, you guessed it, talk about gear. So on this episode, let me just make sure I pull this up properly. And let's see here. Thank you for your patience on this episode. This special Thanksgiving episode while I'm literally on the bike. And if I'm rolling, I want to do this. So I've got my show notes available right here as I roll here. So we'll try to do this. Since I clearly set up these rules ahead of time. Don't try this at home, kids. Only trained semi-professionals such as myself. Friend of the show, Scott Taylor. Hello, Scott. Thank you for writing in. He says, let's talk tools, Tim. Which I think might be a reference to Tim the Toolman Taylor from a popular television show of a million years ago. In episode 22 of the Pedalshift Project, so we're going way back, you talk with author Peter Rice. Hello, Peter, if you're listening. And by extension, Jerry the Dirtbag Bike Mechanic. You remember Jerry's advice? That was amazing. Peter makes a valid point when he says that we willingly climb into cars and make them cross the desert without fear or concern of them breaking down. By extension, without any knowledge how to fix them if they do break down. So why, oh why, and this is the fun part here, does every touring gear list include the tool setup of a basic bike shop? In 40 plus years of riding bikes, I've never popped a spoke, never had a reason to remove a sprocket, never repacked a bottom bracket, never had a chain brake, never had to replace my own brake shifter cable on the road. You are very lucky, sir, for many of those things, at least. No day rider, even long-distance day riders, go out without these concerns. And even if I did break a spoke, I'm not certain I would know how to fix it properly anyways. And most certainly not in a timely manner. Tubes, tire levers, patch kit, pump, hex wrenches to tighten bolts and adjust parts. That's basically what he's saying he brings. I get all that. But when you think back on your years of bike riding and touring, what is the actual and practical toolkit that you think the average ACA bike route tourist realistically needs? All right. So that is the question from friend of the show, Scott Taylor. Scott, thank you for your question. As I start rolling again, I think that what you say is accurate. I believe that for the most part, any kind of repair that you're talking about, bottom brackets replacements and, removing the sprocket, there are people that I've run into who bring along the types of tools that you would need for that kind of very, very high-end kind of bike work on the road. I think I remember, if you remember back to in the teens, Nathan Clevenger, who we did another show on the C&O, you may recall. he brings, or brought, I'm not sure if he's touring anymore, as I've stayed in touch with him, but he was a big proponent of bringing along chain whips and all sorts of different types of things to be able to do any kind of fix while he's on the road. Now, Nathan, as you may recall, is a very self-sufficient dude, and he does not like spending money on things that he feels he can do himself, and he's a fairly proficient bike mechanic. So, if you're in that realm, and you're touring, and you want to go that way, well then by all means do it. You know better than anyone what kind of a weight sacrifice you're making by bringing along full toolkits and large wrenches and things along those lines. And speaking of mechanicals, you may be hearing the same thing that I'm hearing, which is this squeak, squeak, squeak. So we're going to stop and see what is something loose. Answer is no. Answer is the wire for my that's funny, for my dyno hub came undone and was crackling along in the spokes. That's a good way to screw up things. There goes the squeak. That was a timely thing for this particular section of Gear Talk. As I was saying, if you're like Nathan Clevenger, friend of the show, then, and you're willing to make those weight sacrifices, then do it. I would say that as you ask, Scott, if you're going along most ACA routes, there are, and it depends on where you're at, and it depends on the route, but there are bike shops fairly frequently along the route. But can you rely on them? That's the big question. Let me give you an example, and then I'll circle back to sort of what I carry and sort of my personal take on all of this. I was riding the Pacific Coast route a few years ago with Mysterious James. I don't remember which year it was. It might have been 2013. Might have been before then. The Green Goblin had a very serious problem, and was the reason why I said you're lucky that you haven't popped any spokes is that's a fairly frequent issue for a lot of people. I know Michael Riesica, friend of the show, who's been on the show as well, had some problems this past year with a wheel that he had. This bike that I'm riding, the Sequoia Supervians, my main touring bike, has never, ever had a spoke problem. I think if you've got a good wheel build, it's less likely. If you've got maybe a lesser wheel, you might have that problem. Even if you have a good wheel, you might have that problem. It just sort of depends on luck and load often. In any event, I lost a couple of spokes, and that's sort of catastrophic as you start riding. Speaking of catastrophic, here comes the CSX line to accompany our sound. Hope you can hear that. Enjoy that. This is a beautiful sidebar here, a beautiful section of the rail trip. The line, it's very short. Wow, that may be the shortest CSX train ever. The line is right parallel with the trail, and as you're riding the Amtrak, you get to see large portions of the C&O in this section, and I always, when I'm on it, love looking in, seeing who's on the trail and who's not, seeing the campgrounds and whatnot. It's nice. So, back to my story. Spokes. Losing a spoke can be catastrophic because it throws your wheel out of true. And as a result, you aren't able to, you got to undo your brakes if your wheel's coming out of true, because it's going to immediately start rubbing if you've got any kind of closeness to it. Speaking of, by the way, sidebar, again, lots of sidebars on this episode. Bald Eagle hiker-biker campsite just passed. Another great one, except it's so close to the train line. You will be woken up many times, but what a beautiful view of the river. The consequence of that was, all right, so I'm in a town. Great. A town of note, even. I think it was Gold Beach or something, one of those southern Oregon towns north of Brookings. But a town of note with coffee shops and bookstores and things like that. What it was lacking, however, was a bike shop. And it was the morning, and it was I believe 20 miles over a substantial climb to get to Brookings. And that's the closest bike shop. And frankly, I called, found out their open, I either called or I was on the internet at the coffee shop, knew what their closing time was, and knew I had just about enough time to get there before closing to be able to get the repair done. So I went up and over this very substantial hill. This was, of course, the rear wheel, because, of course, it always happens to the rear wheel. And so I went up and over with only front brakes. That's not recommended. I'm gonna be straight up and say that, not recommended. But did it and got to the shop. The guy kept it open longer for me. He was very kind. He did not have to. And I was lucky, because what ends up happening is the next day it was actually closed. And that's frequently an issue when you're on tour, is that, yes, you might be able to find a bike shop to help you out, but frequently bike shops aren't open 7 days a week. And they aren't open certainly 24 hours a day, much as we would like and need them to be. But it just doesn't work that way for a lot of shops. So if you're on an ACA route, there are going to be times, and there's going to be places, where you're going to be 100 miles or more from a bike shop. There's going to be times when you're days away from bicycle repairs, even if you've got a bike shop right by you. So I think that the ultimate sort of recourse here is to, and this, Scott, is getting back to my theory of the case here. You can tell I'm a lawyer, right? And that is that you should be prepared for most things to be able to get it so that your bike is rideable. Maybe not perfectly rideable, but rideable to get you another couple of days down the road. In the instance that I had, I don't think it would have been very safe or effective, and certainly the wheel would have gotten even more out of true over time, while riding on it with a load, by the way, which was part of the problem. It would have gotten slowly worse and worse and worse. So what I have decided is to sort of assess all of the various things that can happen to you on the road and decide, all right, what are the types of things that I can handle? What are the types of things that are catastrophic and I'm going to have to get a ride? All of those different types of things. So for a while, I carried an extra chain because I once broke a chain. Literally broke it. On this bike, in fact, that I'm riding right now. So hopefully that will not happen, because I admitted it publicly and openly right now as I'm riding the bike. And I was luckily close enough to my cabin in West Virginia that my girlfriend was at. I said, hey honey, can you please come and get me? And that worked out fine. But that's a catastrophic failure. You are not really able to ride when your chain breaks like that. What I have done since then is I've learned a few tips and tricks about chain repair. And I think I've talked about it, converting your bike into not a fixie, but a single gear bike as a possible replacement if your derailleur goes. If your chain busts and you've got a chain breaker with you, well, then you can shorten the chain, and although your gearing will be all off, you can at least be pedaling. You can at least be moving. So suboptimal, but you can go. So that's the type of thing that I carry. It's not very big, it's not very heavy, and it does the job. I also, of course, have the type of chains with the quick release links, and those can be helpful as well if I need to take the chain off for another reason. So I do carry, although you don't need to, I carry the quick link release tool. That is probably the thing that I've never used, but I know if I do need to use it, I'll be glad to have it, because it does make it a lot easier to remove those. There. Nice tandem. Never ridden a tandem. Need to do that someday. So, to go back to sort of my philosophy, it's carry the types of tools that are helpful for the things that happen the most. So, as you said, Scott, tire levers, definitely. Patch kit, definitely. Spare tube, definitely. All of those things are probably handling the most common type of thing that I've ever had to deal with, and that's a puncture on the road. Happens infrequently, but frequently enough. Morning. Good morning. An orange bike, ladies and gentlemen, an orange bike. I should have stopped and just said, thank you for riding an orange bike. So the tire levers are important, especially if you've got very tight tires. Many of you are riding tires where you can take them off with your fingers. If that's the case, don't worry with the tire levers. I happen to have fairly new tires on this bike that, and even when they're not, when they wear a little bit, boy, you really need a tire lever to take them off, and more importantly, to put it back on. 2 nights ago, when I was doing a little bit of work pre-ride, I removed the tires to check the tubes just to make sure they were okay, and to kind of just make sure the interior of the tires were in good shape. I do that periodically, sort of just to be on the safe side. And man, it was hard to get that tire back on. It was really hard, and I had to use tire levers and determination and time and all of those things. And I was in an ideal setting inside, so I need tire levers. A good pump, a pump that you're happy with. Yes, and that's something actually worth spending a little money on too. Not always, but sometimes. Good morning. How are you?
How are you?
Good, thank you. And I just passed, by the way, the Canal House, which is a place that if you're interested in sort of a modified version of camping, they are old lock houses, old canal houses here on the C&O, where you can stay indoors. And so if you're not into tent camping, it's something to do. I believe Andrew and his wife were supposed to be in one, but unfortunately we didn't have the chance. I'm interested if anybody out there has ever stayed in one here on the C&O. I'd love to hear your experiences with it. Back to the Gear Talks discussion here. A good pump is worth the money. I have a pump that I have used for years that I'm very happy with. I don't remember where I got it from, so I don't think I can put the link in the show notes for it, but it has a built-in pressure gauge. That is really helpful. It is, especially if if you want to know what the ideal tire pumping up, the right inflation pressure. Boy, English is my mother tongue. You can tell why occasionally I edit these episodes, right? So that pump has been a very helpful thing for me over the years. I have used other pumps and then realized, I don't know what it's inflated to. Maybe I'll just test it with my fingers, which is a terrible test of actual inflation. I've done some blind tests before when I've been like, okay, well, how does it feel at certain pressures and others? I'm always wrong. So the tire inflation meter is kind of nice to have. Coming up on Point of Rocks, Maryland. And the beautiful bridge crossing the Columbia River, the Potomac River. I have Columbia River on my mind lately. Beautiful area. This bridge is a quick story. Well, after I get by the family here, because this is a 9/11 story, sadly. I was living in Washington on September 11, 2001, but I was driving distance away from town teaching a seminar south of Baltimore. And of course, that morning we found out what happened, and as I was driving back towards the district, hearing more and more about what was going on, I learned that the Beltway and many of the inroads into the district had been shut down. So in order for me to get home, I had to take a long out-of-the-way route. I had to use a paper map because my phone didn't have a browser back in those days. And even if it did, the data was toast. The cell lines were toast all around the area. Too many people trying to call loved ones. And I had to come all the way out here to Point of Rocks to cross. So every time I go by that bridge, it always reminds me of 9/11, whether I'm biking under it or on the rare occasion I drive over it. Again, back to Gear Talk. Other things that I carry a multi-tool with all of the hex wrenches that you could possibly want. Scott, you talked about this. It's to tighten and to make sure that things are very easily locked down. Now, just a few minutes ago, as we were riding here, and you started to hear that squeak, I thought, well, I'm going to have to pull that out and tighten things down. But I found that actually it was my wires on my dyno hub. For that, I would use a different set of tools. I carry a Leatherman style device for that. Coming up on your left. Thank you. It's really warmed up nicely. So it's a little sidebar here. Very nice today. And some scouts out for a walk. The Leatherman style tool I find to be essential because it has things like the pliers, it has things, the knife. I find that I use that more than anything else, and largely not for the bike, but I use it quite a bit. That's a tool that I would recommend you bring for the bike, but for other things as well. It's just a really handy thing. It's even a good pot holder, anything you need. It tends to have some good utility to it. Talked about the hex wrenches and the multi-tool patch kit. That's largely it. As I think about it, I'm thinking what's in my bag. I do. To go back to my story with the spokes. The thing that I learned the most about that was, I can't guarantee that I'm going to be able to on a route, well, like I'm on right now. The closest bike shop is behind me, quite a bit. It's open on Saturdays, I happen to know that. The next bike shop, may not be till Leesburg, and then I'd have to cross the river on a ferry and still go on some road miles. It's not convenient. So the thing that I learned about that, Calico Rocks hiker biker campsite, by the way, for those of you playing the home game, looks beautiful today. Making sure that you've got some way to handle a spoke problem. Some of you I know carry spare spokes and know how to do it. I carry what's called an emergency spoke fixer. It has a different name than that. It's actually a Kevlar strand that you loop in a particular way, and it pulls the wheel taut where you have a broken spoke. Now, do you break more than one spoke? You've got a problem. But having one at least can kind of even out a tire at least a little bit. That's the type of thing that can get you the extra full day ride in. If you've got the time and patience to do it. It's not easy. Those of you who are more adept at utilizing spare spokes will often bring spare spokes. I've never done that. I brought this kit along as sort of my replacement. The other thing that I bring along, and this is very low weight, that is a tire boot made by the same folks generally who do patch kits as well. It goes on the inside of your tire. That plus a $1 bill trick is generally going to be good enough for most wheel problems, or tire problems that you'll run into. Of course, unless it happens at the bead like I had this past summer. Spokes and wheel boots, tire boots. These are things that are in the realm of unlikely to happen, but possible to happen. So I recommend that you carry something to help you in that realm. Again, if you're a day tripper, if you're in an area where you know it's easy for you to get a ride or to get called to get help, you may not need these things. If you're on an ACA route, you're going to be in an area where this stuff can happen to you, and you may not have the ability to really get out unless you're cool calling for help and waving down someone with a pickup truck or something like that. I tend to be a little more try to be self-sufficient where possible. I'm not against that, but me personally, I want to try to be prepared to be able to help myself whenever possible, because you just never know. You just don't know where it's going to happen, circumstances, etc. So the types of things I would do that for would be for more catastrophic failures, things that I can't make a minor fix to and roll and keep going myself. You talked about, fixing a bottom bracket. That's the type of thing that I'm not going to bring the tools to handle that. If there was something in my cassette that was a problem, I'm not going to handle that. True story. I had that on my very first ride. Not my very first ride. My first, what I often call my first big tour. More on that in a moment after I say hello to these good citizens who have gotten over all the way. Here at mile marker 47. Morning. So, I'm riding my bike and I'm noticing that the chain tension is bad. When I'm coasting, my chain droops. That's not right. It's not right. And what had happened is that my cassette had gotten gunked up, dirty something. And this was a supported ride, the only supported ride I've ever done. And I'm really grateful, frankly, that I was on a supported ride for that one, because I didn't know enough about bikes to know what the problem was. Bike mechanic, who was quite good, told me a few things that I needed to know. Said, look, if we were in a shop, I could take this cassette off, I could clean it out, but out here, with the resources and what we can do for you guys, it would be too hard. And he recommended getting a new wheel when we were in Fort Bragg. And I did that. I just replaced the whole rear tire. That was obviously an expensive solution, but it worked, obviously. And it was much better than having a scenario where my chain was coming out of tension and was creating some real problems anytime I was coasting down big hills, which, if you're familiar with the Central California coast, you got a few of those. So that's an example of something where it happens, but do you really want to bring the stuff to be able to handle that on the road? Some people say yes, absolutely. I'm riding thousands of miles in an expedition-style ride and need that. Scott, you were asking about ACA routes. I'm not so sure that would be necessary. I could have continued riding on that. It was better that I didn't. I had the capability of having the order called ahead and getting it replaced. And that's sort of what I did. If I was solo and had the knowledge, which I did in later years, I would have done the same. I would have called Fort Bragg, called that wonderful bike shop there. I can't remember the name of it, but it saved my butt. And said, hey, this is what I need. Do you have it? Can you get it? I'll be there next day. That's another solution for those kind of bigger ticket types of things. But if something catastrophic happens that you would need bigger, badder tools, those tend to be on the lower end of possibility, and so I don't carry those tools myself. I do carry a small crescent wrench that I use for taking pedals off. It is not a pedal wrench remover per se, but I keep those threads greased, and they can remove fairly easily with just a regular old style 99-cent crescent wrench from enter name of big box store here. So, Scott, I think I answered your question ad nauseum with many interruptions, but I would say you want to carry the basics. You want to be prepared for the things that happen the most. Any kind of tire puncture, any kind of chain issue, and I would recommend being prepared for popping a spoke, because that happens when you're on a load over an extended period of time. So those are the things that I would say, multi-tool, Leatherman style type thing, always good to have. Basically, you want to be able to do the things that can get you going. And that's why I carry that kind of a toolkit. I know people that carry far, far less. And it works for them, and that's fantastic. For me, I try to be as self-sufficient as possible, and knowing with the experience that I've had that sometimes stuff happens, and I would prefer not to have to call and get a ride. As listeners of the show know, there have been instances where it has been more prudent for me to end a tour early because of bike mechanicals, and I've done that. I've been fortunate where I've been on a couple of those things near the C&O, near towns, with train lines, so that's been helpful and doable. So hopefully that helps, and you will be able to take that for your next tour going forward. A little after 10:30 a.m. now, and where are we? We are at Nolan's Ferry, one of the former crossings back in the day. No longer active. Oh, interesting. We got some sled dogs. I am positive they're going to go faster than me, so I am going to... Oh, yeah. Is it easy for me to pass you on the left here? Sorry about that. Thank you. Have a good day. Well, that was interesting. I actually got a few pictures of that as well. Hopefully you'll get a chance to see those in the show notes. Gentleman had a fat bike, and he was pulled by several dogs, so it was good training for them. And was taking up most of the trail, but was kind enough to pull over and let me by. So I think I've rambled quite a bit, and a very happy Thanksgiving to everybody out there.
I'd like to close out the show as we do every week with a big thank you to all the supporters of the show through Pedalshift Society. If you like what you hear, you can help maintain Pedalshift as an independent, listener-supported voice while expanding the offerings. We're talking $5, $2, even $1 a month can help with the cost of hosting the podcast and hosting the website as well. You can do it for a bit. You can cancel anytime. There's annual and one-shot support as well. Go check it out, pedalshift.net/society. On to the society. Ethan Georgie, Kimberly Wilson, Caleb Jenkinson, Cameron Lane, Andrew McGregor, Michael Hart, Josiah Matthews, Keith Nagel, Brock Dittis, Thomas Skadow, Seth Krieger, Marco Lowe, Terrence Manson, Noah Schroer, Harry Telgadas, John Sikorsky, Richard Killian, Chris Barron, Brian Wren, Mark Van Ram, Brad Hepwell, Paul Mulvey, Stuart Buchan, Todd Stutz, Mr. T, Roxy Arning, Nathan Poulton, Harry Hugel, Stephen Dickerson, Vince LaGreco, Ruth Divorcey, Michelle Miller, Matthew Lewis, Michael Baker, Billy Crafton, Paul Culbertson, Scott Culbertson, Matt Perry, Danielle Jepson, Cody Florchinger, Tom Beninati, Bobby Ruppel, Roy Everett, Greg Braithwaite, and John Mayer, and all anonymous and past contributors for helping make this show happen. Thank you for joining. You can find Pedalshift at pedalshift.net for more great bicycle touring content. You can hear the Pedalshift Project through Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast app. Opening music courtesy of Jason Kent off his self-titled album. The track is called America. Check out his band Sunfield's latest release, Mono Mono, wherever cool music is available.